Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to process a mixed focus photo in Lightroom. Before we get started with this tutorial, let's look and see what we're trying to achieve. This is the original image that we're going to be working with. It has been cropped and straightened, but that's all. And this is the effect that we're going to achieve using the develop options in Lightroom. Now this is one of a pair of images. There's another video coming that shows this same scene, but with the leaves in focus and St. Paul's Cathedral out of focus. And I'm also going to show you how I would process that image. But for this video, this is the image that we're going to be working with. To get started with this image, the first thing I'm going to do is crop it and straighten it. And I think it can be cropped almost to a square crop. Not quite, but almost. And we'll just straighten it as well. So I'll click Done. Now this image is a nice mix of out of focus leaves and the St. Paul's dome. What I want to do in processing it is to enhance both parts of the image. But let's start with the image itself. So it's pretty well exposed, although it could perhaps take a little bit of extra exposure. We could add a bit of contrast, but look what happens when I bring the contrast up. Those leaves are going very dark, so I'm not going to do that right now. Let's look at the highlights. I'm a little tempted to bring the highlights down a little bit just to enhance some of the sky colors through here. And let's look at the shadows. Well, opening up the shadows is going to lighten the entire image, and in particular these leaves. I think that that's a pretty good setting for now. Let's shift double click on this middle point in the white slider to set a white point and do the same with the blacks. So we now have our white and black point set. You can see that immediately we set that black point, we really got a lot of contrast into the image. Let's just do that again. No blacks, and then shift double click. And having blacks is really helping the image. I'll add a little bit of clarity, which is a mid-tone contrast adjustment. That's really helping out St. Paul's Cathedral. Just got in the back of my mind that I'm a little worried about these leaves right now, but let's see what we can do with them. I'm going to increase vibrance, which is going to increase the saturation in undersaturated colors. Let's now go to color, and I'm interested in the oranges and in the yellows. Let's start with the yellows. Now we get a couple of choices with yellows. We can take them towards orange or towards green. Well, for an autumn image, orange is going to be the better direction to head in. We can increase the saturation, but also increase the luminance to try and lighten these leaves a little bit. Let's go to orange and let's see what we can do here. Well, we can go towards red, which is making them more orange, or towards yellow, which is making them more green. So I'm going to settle on a little bit more orange because I'm liking the contrast between the orange and the leaves and the blue of St. Paul's and this building here. Orange and blue are opposite colors on the color wheel, and they contrast each other really, really well. So it's giving our image a really nice look. I'm just going to intensify the saturation here a little bit and then increase the luminance to make the leaves look a little bit more transparent. So I'm pretty happy with that right now. Let's go to the blues because I'm looking at St. Paul's and this building here and just seeing if there's any mileage in adjusting the blues. Let's take the luminance down a little bit and the saturation up. And I'm thinking that's looking pretty nice. So now let's go to the adjustment brush and just see what we can do with the adjustment brush. One of the things I'm considering is crisping up St. Paul's just a little bit more. So with the adjustment brush selected and auto mask turned on, I'm just going to click on St. Paul's dome and then start painting over the area I want to adjust. Now my adjustment brush settings are just way over the top. This has got a huge exposure setting on it and it's looking really nasty, but it doesn't matter. Right now all I'm concerned about is making sure that I'm selecting over St. Paul's, and whatever's happening in the settings for the adjustment brush just don't matter. I'm a person who prefers to get the adjustment brush down first of all and then adjust my settings. I know a lot of people will go and set their settings up before they start, but really until I've got a selection that I can see things with, I actually prefer to concentrate on the selection first and then the actual settings later on. So up here I'm just going to click because I'm really mindful that I don't want to add too much in the way of these leaves by accident as I work. So I'm going to let Lightroom pretty much make this selection for me. Now, if you use the auto mask feature, you'll find that it doesn't always pick up things in the middle of the image, and so you may want to switch from auto mask to just painting on when you're nearly finished with your selection. Just keep well away from the edges because you don't want to add to the edges, but you may want to just fix the central point of the selection that you've made. Now I'm going to press the letter O so I can see what my mask looks like and just make sure that I've got everything that I want to get. The only thing I'm concerned about is up the top of the tower here. I think I've gone too far, so I'm grabbing the eraser, just making sure that there is nothing selected here in the leaves around the tree that should not be selected. Okay, let's turn our overlay off by pressing the letter O, or you can click the Show Selected Mask Overlay checkbox here. Let's reset our adjustment brush settings by double-clicking on the word Effects. And now let's go and add some effects. Well, I'm going to increase the saturation a little bit. I'm going to increase clarity to try and get some additional sharpness through here. And I can also increase sharpness if I want to, trying to apply a little bit of sharpness just in a localized area. And if I'm happy with that, I'll click Done. Now this is a DNG or a raw image, so it's going to need some sharpening, but let's just have a look and see what's happening with the image because this is a bit noisy. So let's go to Detail and let's just kick up some luminance noise adjustment here, but without smoothing the image too much as a consequence. So I think that's a pretty good setting there. Now let's look at sharpness, and I'm going to have a mix of areas which should be sharp and areas which should not be sharp on the screen as I do this. I'm going to wind up the sharpening to quite a high value and then Alt or Option drag on the radius slider. So what I want here is halos to appear in the areas where I want the image to be sharpened, but not in areas where I don't want it to be sharpened. I'm thinking a fairly small radius value is going to be good here, something like about 0.6. And then we'll do the same with detail. Again, we want to see only halos and only sort of detail in the areas where we want the sharpening to appear. So low values for radius and for detail here, but we want a really high value for masking. So I'm going to Alt drag on the masking slider because anything that is white is being sharpened, anything that's black is not being sharpened. And so what we want to see is that the leaves and their associated noise is not being sharpened too much at all. So I'm going to look for a compromise here. I want sharpness in the dome of St. Paul's and I want no or little sharpening in the leaves. So I'm thinking about an 85 masking value is going to be pretty good here. So I'll let go my left mouse button and then let go my Alt or Option key. And now let's just zoom out. As a final adjustment, I think this image would do well to have a very small vignette. So I'm going to the Effects option. I'm just going to bring in a small highlight priority vignette by dragging the amount slider in a negative direction. The reason for this is that these corners are really quite light and I want your attention to be in the middle of the image and not in the corners. Now this can be achieved one of two ways, or you can combine both if you wish. One of them is to add a highlight priority vignette to the image. The other one would be to darken the image a little bit and add a radial filter over St. Paul's. So this is the highlight priority vignette effect. Let's go and see how we would apply a radial filter. Now the radial filter was new in Lightroom 5, so if you're using Lightroom 4, I suggest you stick with the post-crop vignette because that's going to be your better option. In Lightroom 5, here's how you'd use your radial filter. Just drag out the radial filter on the image. Again, just ignore what's happening when you actually set it up and just get the size right. So I'm just going to drag in on the sides here. Let's reset it entirely by double clicking on the effect option. Now, right now, you can't be sure whether it's working on the inside or the out, so I'm just going to drop down exposure. Well, the effect is being applied outside the radial filter. If you want it to be applied inside, just invert your mask. but we could actually go with a outside one because our image is already pretty well exposed in the middle. So let's just go and decrease the exposure on the outside, not quite as much as we had. And that's also drawing our attention into the middle of the image. Before we finish up, let's have a look and see how far we've come. This is the original image we started with. It's been cropped and straightened, but nothing else has been done with it. And this is the final rendition of the image. It's a lot more contrasty, and as an image, it's a lot more interesting than it was. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more video tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.